Hey everyone, Doug here with B&H. And today we are here at Cycle Therapy. Now this is a motorcycle showroom floor and repair shop. They've got a lot of awesome mechanical and industrial textures going on in there. I can't wait to show you what's inside. But right now we're here to talk about Canon's brand new Cinema EOS C80. That's right, this is the successor to the C70. It's still around, but I can speak personally about this because the team here, we have a fleet of C70s. We use them almost every single day, so we're very familiar with the camera. We're very comfortable with it. Physically, they look very similar. From a distance, you could probably mistake the two, but there are some key changes on the outside and notably on the inside. Top of the order has to be the 6K full frame sensor inherited directly from the C400. That's kind of a shock here. Using that sensor means you get things, yes, like the triple base ISO setup and the dual pixel autofocus 2 that we've seen recently in the C400, but now it's in this compact package. So let's go inside and we'll see exactly what the C80 has to offer. So while we get some of our shots set up for the day, let's just take a quick look at some of the key upgrades here with the C80. Now, as I just said, it looks almost indistinguishable, but there are some key differences here, not just inside, but outside as well. So the first one we have to look at is this, the 12G SDI port. This is huge. This is something I know many C70 shooters probably wanted to see. I'm personally very happy to see it here, but more than that is that you can output simultaneously from the 12G SDI and the HDMI, which opens up a ton of monitoring options with the camera. Our C70s, for what it's worth, get a lot of action. And so one thing that's very useful to know here is that the hinge on the C80 has now been completely redesigned. It's much more firm and can handle a lot more of that day-to-day use. And what's more is that if you look on the backside here, there's actually a little locking mechanism. So when you close it up, it will lock in place. It doesn't wiggle around. And even when you flip it back, it also locks here as well. So you have this extra security in place for when the camera's not in use, or if you just are, literally running and gunning and you don't want the screen kind of moving around a lot. While we're back here though, the control scheme is largely the same as the C70. It's very familiar. If you've used that one, you'll be right at home here. But there is one key change that I noticed, which is the inclusion of a new joystick right over here. This is very similar to the one featured on the R1, so you get a little more fine control over the AF point and the menus. And then one more thing on the back here, this is cool, kind of a surprise, is an RJ45 Ethernet port, so you can do direct tethered streaming or multi-camera control right out of the C80. So given that this is a full frame sensor, it's hard not to make the comparison to the C400 because it is in fact the same sensor. But just like the C70 was sort of the smaller, more portable companion to the C300 Mark III, the C80 now is the smaller, more portable compact version of the C400. So we're using the RF 35mm f1.4L VCM lens here. We've used this in a few recent videos. Personally, I think it's great because it does have the declicked iris and you do have that really nice razor sharp L glass here. Now, before we get into today's demos, we actually had some time with the C80 yesterday as well, which meant that we were able to use it in a more controlled environment. We were able to use a little more colorful lighting and we got to do a musical performance and interview. So let's take a look at that first. The color handling, noise levels, and dynamic range here were fantastic as we expected from what is essentially the C400 sensor. You get subtle shadow detail and smooth highlights all around. Plus we shot most of the video here in RAW and some C-Log 2 for the high frame rate stuff, but that gave us a lot of flexibility to tweak things just a bit. And of course, what really made it special was how much we could lean on the 4K 120 FPS modes here to get more intimate detail shots of Andrew's performance. Dave over here is capturing some B-roll insert shots of the space around us here. As you can see, we're in a bike showroom floor. There's some gorgeous textures and metallic surfaces here. It's gritty at times. As you can see, it's kind of a tight space here though. Side to side, we don't have much room to play with, and the walkways themselves are chained off. So that means that when we set up our shots, we have to be very deliberate with them, and we also have to move pretty quickly and make sure our setup stays pretty tight and compact. Now, the C80 is kind of the perfect camera for this because it's got everything that you need from a cinematic production perspective in a much smaller body than something like the C400, for example. It's the same sensor, but is a much smaller package. So the only limitation we have to worry about here really is the maximum raw frame rate. Now, the 6K full frame raw that's in the C400 is here, but it's up to only 30 FPS here. So what you're gonna see today, we're gonna shoot in a mix of 6K full frame raw and 4.3 Super 35 cropped raw, because that allows us to get up to 60 FPS. So still affording us the overall image flexibility with a minor compromise on the framing. But I think the results are gonna speak for themselves. So given that this is the same sensor from the C400, it's no surprise that we're looking at very similar performance when it comes to autofocus. That's of course thanks to the inclusion of dual pixel autofocus 2, which was something that I really wanted to see in the original. I'm so happy to see that it's here in the C80. It really makes a difference, especially with a little more complicated tracking shots. If subjects cross each other's paths or go behind things and are obscured, DP-AF2 is much better at maintaining focus between those parts of the shot. It's also useful to have in general because shooting the way we were, which was very run and gun, means that we were able to just go from wall to wall, bike to bike, quickly getting autofocus as needed, and making sure that we had shots in rapid succession. So let's take a quick look at the I/O options here on the C80. As I've been saying throughout the video, this is very, very similar to the C70. Of course, the one thing that really does stick out is the SDI port up here. Now, since it is a physical change up top, it probably does impact your ability to use C70 cages and rigs, but just keep that in mind if you're upgrading. This is such a welcome addition here, I can't say that enough. Below that, it starts to look more like the C70. So we have our mini XLR inputs, always nice to have for pro audio, our 3.5mm mic and headphones right there, USB-C on the side, and remote below that, and of course, the HDMI connection. The rest of it is pretty much exactly the same. You know, you have your ND buttons, white balance customization, waveform monitors, peaking display, and zebras. And then on the front, we have the same custom buttons, both 11, 10, record. The SD slots are unchanged. The time code is also unchanged here. If we go to the back, we discussed this a bit before, but just so you can see it really clearly, there is an RJ45 connector right here. Now that's wonderful to have for either live streaming connections or for multi-camera control. Now, one other thing I forgot to mention about the physical design of the camera, it's right up top here. You can see we have a redesigned hot shoe setup going on. So instead of a regular hot shoe, we have Canon's multi-function shoe, which they've included on a few of their recent cameras. We're gonna leave it covered up for today, you know, just to prevent any dust or moisture getting in. We're not really gonna use it today. But in front of it is the slot for the handle. Very similar to the C70's handle, it has an integrated screw, so we just tighten that on. A little more streamlined looking in my opinion, but we still have threading on the side for the included shock mount. So let's take a quick look at the menus here. If you watched our C400 video, you're gonna recognize a lot of this, and honestly, it's very, very close to the C70 as well, so that makes sense, of course, but there are some changes here. So first menu, let's move over to the base ISO selection. This is going to be directly inherited. You have 800, 3200, and 12,800. We had a lot of light going on today, so we really didn't have a need to use the other modes, but they are here. They're incredibly flexible if you need them. We were here with base ISO 800 for the whole day. If we move over more, you have your continuous autofocus that we've left on. We mostly stayed with the dual pixel autofocus throughout the day. This is DP-AF2, by the way, just so you know. Same again from the C400, it's wonderful here. You definitely feel the improvements over the original version. And then if we move over, you can see we have our either people, animals, or none for subject detection, detection priority or detect only, and eye detection, of course. Right now we have face detection auto exposure off. We're not relying on it today. If we go over typical, you have your 709 options, C-Log 2 and 3, of course, 2 being our go-to for almost everything. However, today we did go with RAW for the most part. We'll get back to that in a minute. If we go over to the recording and media setup, the first thing really that changes this over the 70, the biggest thing, of course, is that it's full frame. We have full frame here or Super 35 cropped. We're gonna stick with full frame. We mostly relied on that, but we had some changes here and there. And then, of course, into media. So we almost never used XF-HEVC-S today. I actually don't think we used it at all today. I have it selected here, but we're gonna go back up to RAW LT. Most of the highest end formats are in LT for this, meaning your 6K full frame RAW and the Super 35 60p RAW. So in other words, if I go here and change it, you can't go above 30, and that's of course in the full frame mode. If I want to go to ST, it's gonna not even be an option. If I switch to Super 35, you see the crop, I go back, now I have access to ST. So that's slightly less compression, higher bit rate if you really need it. Honestly, LT already looks phenomenal. If I go here, no 5994 option, so I'm gonna drop back down to LT, and now I have the 5994 option. So that's how you get that 4.3K Super 35 crop RAW recording at 60p. So before I move over, I'm gonna also just show you real quick, this has inherited the C400's new XF-HEVC-S and AVC-S formats. So now before we go over to the recording modes, let's just go back 1 sec and change the crop back to full frame. So we'll get our frame back, and then I'm going to go into the recording mode. This is where you get your 4K 120. So you can go into slow and fast motion, set your 120 right here, it's already set. And then of course, just make sure that your base frame rate is changed to what you desire. So for our sake, it's gonna be 24, 2398. And then I think you just need to make sure it's back up to 120, yeah. So this gives you 120 with full autofocus support. So moving over a bit, if we go into the monitoring setup, one of the things that was missing from the C70 was a level. And trust me, I always want it. The C80 finally, under custom display 1 here, has a level. So you can enable both a numeric style level, which just tells you if you're there or not, or a bar, which gives you the tilt and roll. So in this case, we can see here, let's see if I can just force it off with the tripod. Yep, you can see it moving. So we'll try to roughly get it there, back in place. And so huge assistance here. So that about wraps it up for our time today with Canon's brand new Cinema EOS C80, a wonderful upgrade and evolution from the C70. C70, of course, still in the line. It's a Super 35 option. This is now the full frame option. So if you've been wanting to get a taste of that C400 sensor, and it's a surprise to see it here already, then this is the way to go. Small, portable, allowed us to move around a lot today and combine the things that you inherit from that, such as the triple base ISO and the dual pixel autofocus 2, plus Canon's new hybrid lens series, such as the 24-105 we have here and the 35 VCM we've been using earlier today, and you have a phenomenally capable portable machine. Oh, and let's not forget the SDI port, huge right there alone. So that's about it. Let us know in the comments below how you could use the Cinema EOS C80 on your next production. I'm Doug with B&H, and I'll see you next time.